This is just a quick video to explain how editing works in Easotope. I'm going to use the mass spectrometer configuration here to explain this. In the mass spectrometer screen, you can see on the left a list of mass spectrometers that are already configured in the database. And if you want to look at one, you just click on it and you see the detailed information. Mass spectrometers also have reference gases and correction intervals associated with them, so you can also dig deeper and see those records individually. If you have permission, then you are able to edit these records, but not everyone has permission. So if you see that this text here is gray instead of black, and you see that this plus button here is gray, then you don't have permission to edit this data. You can still view the data because the data is necessary for you to do your scientific research, but you may not be able to edit it. It may be up to a lab manager to edit this data. Assuming we can edit the data, we can create a new mass spectrometer here. I can show you how that works. We click the plus, then we just type the name of the mass spec 4 to be creative. And then we have a new record available. The way we realize that data has now been modified is this little star here in the tab folder, and the fact that this data is no longer selectable. So as soon as I started typing the mass spec 4 name, I could no longer select a different mass spectrometer. That makes sense because we're currently in the process of editing something. We have to finish what we're doing before we can go do something else. The other thing to notice here is that up in the File menu, we have two options. We have Revert, which will delete all the information that we just typed, and Save, which will save it in the database. So here I'm going to click Save, and now the mass spec 4 has been created and added to our mass spectrometer list. If we click on it, we can see reference gas and correction interval lists that have been allocated to it, even though they're currently empty, and we see the information that we typed before. We can also edit data that already exists in the database. You can just view the data that you want to edit, and then let's just say we want to modify this description. As we type new text, Easotope realizes that the data that we're currently looking at has been changed and needs to be updated in the database. As before, we have the star in the tab, and we have grayed out text in these fields here, so we can't select any other information until we decide what to do with the information that we have here. So here again we have the revert, or we have the save option. This time I'm going to revert. That brings the record back to the way it was before, and now we can select. These selection options are currently available to us. One other thing to notice is how the error correction works. If you start making errors in your input, so for example I type a bunch of letters here in a field that Easotope knows has to be a numeric field, you'll see some kind of error icon here, a red exclamation mark. Anytime you see this icon, you can roll over it and get a tooltip that explains what the problem is. So it's telling you that this is a numeric value, you can't type letters in there. We can remove this and the error message goes away and the fields go back to being editable. If we're in an error situation and you look up in the File menu, you'll see that there's a Revert option, but there's not a Save option. That's because we currently have errors in our data. Easotope won't allow you to save bad data in the database. The last thing to note about editing is that there's also a delete menu option here. The delete only works for replicate information that you've entered into the database and want to delete, or scan files that you've added to the database and want to delete. You cannot currently delete mass spectrometers or standards or anything like that. So The delete functionality exists but is very limited.